reka nkwihoreze ndetse nicyo wambyariye nicyo wandereye none ubwo maze gukura ngatora agatege ubwo naciye akenge reka ngukorere nkoresha ibyiza wampaye maze nkwihoreze.
We appreciate that you're here to join us in this commemoration, a powerful reminder of what happened, but also a discussion about what we can do in the future. We're going to start with a documentary called The Journey to Hell. That was made by the National Commission on Genocide in Rwanda. Throughout this program, please remember this is a very solemn day. You have survivors who are sitting in this room who will be thinking about what they went through, thinking about their loved ones. Over 1 million people who were murdered. There were parents, there were children. There were people with dreams and ambitions, just like you and I. So we'll keep that in mind throughout the day, throughout the lunch, throughout the afternoon program, and continue the tradition of kwibuka, to remember. We thank you so much for coming to be with us for the 19th commemoration of the genocide against Tutsis that happened in 1994. For those who just came in a little while ago, you just watched a documentary made in Rwanda by Rwandans called The Journey to Hell. Talked about the discussions, the debates that are happening in Rwanda, the consequences of the genocide. You saw people who are older, younger generations. It was a mix of people speaking. This program is a solemn program. We have survivors in the room who witnessed genocide firsthand. We have people who will be thinking about what that meant to them, what it means to them, and how that will continue to affect their lives. But it's also a program that will also talk about the future, what we can do to prevent genocide, the greatest crime humans can commit. You have a program in front of you. If you don't have it, please feel free to get one from the back. We have speakers who have come from across the country, from different countries to be with us. Take the time to understand, to learn, and to share what you learned today. At this moment, we're going to start with the national anthems of Rwanda and the US, and we'll start with the Rwandan anthem. At this moment, we stand for a minute of silence. It's now my honor to welcome Yvette Rukasagahunga, who is a survivor, a leader in the Rwandan community throughout this country, but especially in the New York area, where we both live. She's been the spearperson to organize this commemoration, as she did last year.
Your Excellency, Engineer James Kimonyo, Ambassador of Rwanda to the United States, Your Excellency Clotilde Maranga Gasarabwe, United Nations Assistant Secretary General, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, and honorable friends of Rwanda, fellow compatriots, fellow survivors, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm honored and deeply humbled to be in your presence. On behalf of the Rwandan community in the United States, in partnership with the Embassy of Rwanda to the US, I would like to warmly welcome you and thank you for traveling this far to stand with us as we mourn the loss of 1 million of our own, parents, children, siblings, other relatives, friends, acquaintances, neighbors and strangers whose lives were heartlessly taken simply because they were born Tutsi, looked Tutsi, or because they were perceived as Hutu traitors for opposing the anti-Tutsi propaganda led by the then government of Rwanda. At this time, we, the survivors, can't help but wonder, why them? Why then? Why that way? As we tap on the very scarce yet extremely valuable resources we inherited, we recognize the need to reach out to our neighboring countries and overseas, not to proclaim our victimhood, but our stewardship of peace, unity, and reconciliation, the beacon to our political and socio-economic transformation, as we strengthen our existing and seek new partnership throughout the world. You, friends of Rwanda in the room, stand as a testimony to our victory. Stand as a testimony to our victorious journey of Renaissance.
As we strive to self-reliance, I'm reminded of Ezekiel when he stood in his day in his country, Israel. The scripture says his country was a valley of very dry bones. That was the situation. But the most interesting thing is that God told him, Ezekiel, speak life into these dry bones. Interestingly, bones don't have ears. How could they hear? Rwanda is speaking life because we believe that God has taken us out of a horrible pit.
Our first testimony, our first speaker is Mrs. Tabitha Mugenzi. She's a Rwandan born. She was born in Rwanda in the Western Province. She left her beloved country to attend school in Niles, Michigan in 1989. While it was believed that school was her primary intention to leave Rwanda, there was another very important reason for her going abroad: survival. Tabitha and her family, like all the other Tutsis, were condemned to discrimination, oppression, and bad treatment simply because of who they were and where they originated from. Hope for her was to be found only outside the country. When the genocide took place, Tabitha was in Canada, where she lives with her husband and children. She may have survived the apparent physical torture of the genocide, but the emotional wounds continue to haunt her. Her testimony is a journey she has been on and continues to live, to tell.
It was not
my initiative to leave my country, Rwanda. It was not. 1989, my sister, her husband, and one of my brothers came to me, told me that I have to leave. Beginning of October 1990, someone called me from Kenya, Africa, and he said, Tabitha, things are getting bad in Rwanda. As desperate as I was, I went to work. There is a gentleman, he used to work with me. He was Rwandese. He came from Rwanda. He was a Hutu. That day, he was smiling, happier more than ever. He came to me. He said, I am so proud. I am so proud today. I am so proud of my country, my people. I am so proud of my president. You have no idea how they killed your sister. I love it.
Thank you, Tabitha, for calling upon the past today, in spite of the difficulty in doing so. For stepping back into the dark reaches of your memory and losses, and lighting our way with your words. For communicating the loss you once endured and what you continue to endure. I stand here with a heavy heart, and yet emboldened by the trust of all the rescapés who opened their lives to me and shared their stories with me. I do not speak for them, nor on their behalf, but rather for myself, as a witness to their memories and how they bear them. I speak both as an outsider, but also as a friend, a brother, and a son who has inherited these relationships and a history that was at once not my own, yet has become entwined with my own. Since establishing the archive in 2006, I have learned over and over from the rescapés how essential it is that they establish their own histories and family legacies and transmit them to their children. To withhold their histories would be like denying the genocide, one survivor shared with me. Unless her family history is recorded, she said, when she dies, so too will her family name.
The title of my presentation is a question, and that is, who speaks for the survivors of the genocide against Tutsi, Rwandan Tutsi in particular? When we address this question, of course, we have to look at what the different connotations this question brings. What is suggested in that question? Are we saying who actually speaks for the survivors? Or who speaks on behalf of survivors? Who speaks for the survivors but shouldn't? Who does not speak but should? Who does not speak but couldn't? There are many other questions that came up with that, including whose voice is not allowed to come out. In current terms, I would put it this way, and this is something I'm trying to articulate, and if you do not get anything that I'm talking about today, here's a sentence that I want you to retain. The problems are over there. The solutions are from here. Again, remember, I'm in the US, I'm in the West. The problems are over there. The solutions are from here. In addition, the diagnosis of the problems are over here, in the US or in the West. So that is one thing that I want you to retain.
Survivors, you are the people for whom we are all here. And I have to say that my road in getting here has been an interesting one. My family history involves survivors of the Holocaust, and in Prague, Czech Republic, there are names of my family members on the synagogue walls in the ghetto. I also have suffered a good friend of mine having been murdered. And so my journey in coming here and speaking with you also has some tinges for me of trying to understand. I'm here to stand with you in your sorrow, even though there is no way for me to be in your shoes. Each of you here is an individual on their own path, and it is a lonely one. It is your being here together, sharing this moment together, that helps all of you to continue your road to recovery. The very best that I can do is to stand here with you and be willing to hear you. Today we are gathered here to share the grief and loss of loved ones, but also to honor your families and friends. What should the commemoration of the genocide be on the path to honor loved ones and to recover? I ask this question because the path is a different thing to different people, and it is a different thing across different periods of time as the years pass.
The commemoration of genocide against Tutsi, as we strive for self-reliance, is something special today. When I was called, I was thinking, as an international civil servant of United Nations, and having experienced myself the genocide of Rwanda, being a Rwanda citizen, experienced this debate in the UN was painful. But again, I thought, maybe there is a reason of something. Maybe there is a reason to be there. Maybe there is a reason to remind others that never again. Then I went back to the UN's charter. This small book I carry with me always. And this book was written, as you know, on 26 June 1945 in San Francisco, where all nations gathered to say never again after the Second War. 49 years later, after the nation gathered and the signature of the UN Charter in San Francisco, what happened? Intolerance, hate, and dignity of humankind, terrible violation of human rights in a world, genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda. Tested to the limit is one of the books which touched me from one of the survivors. Kukindiho is another one. Those are the words of some of our beloved friends who survived genocide. As we remember what happened in Rwanda 19 years ago, as we remember our beloved ones who passed away, let's not forget them, cherish them, but celebrate life, celebrate resilience, celebrate life.
Rwanda risks following the path of other geopolitical war zones where conflict is both historic and ever-threatening. In Northern Ireland, they continue to trace their mutual hostilities to the Battle of the Boyne in 1690, and the threat of violence is ever present. Just recently, bombs were placed in a police station in an attempt to injure people. In Eastern Europe, the Serbs and the Turks traced their animosities to the Battle of Kosovo in 1389. Does Rwanda want to take that path? Martin Luther King would have a different dream. The government of Rwanda is working on a vision or dream for the future. Let's consider some of the factors that will allow the people of Rwanda, having gone through so much, to also begin to dream. Put another way, what are the potential barriers to creating a society that all Rwandans will embrace? I think we can use some of the lessons from psychology and our US experience to help answer the question. Let me be clear, I'm not here to exhort survivors to forgive. Forgiveness is a long and difficult process and may not be possible for many. Each person will need to decide for him or herself. The point to recognize is that forgiveness is an act of strength on the part of the forgiver, and the main beneficiary is the person doing the forgiving, for it frees him or her of the anger and hatred that keeps them prisoner to the past. We regularly draw the wrong conclusions when bad acts are committed. We mistakenly believe only evil people do bad things. While there are certainly evil people in the world and they do evil things, much more common is when situations make good people do bad things. When fear and anger are aroused, bad things are often done. when a country is controlled by a genocidal regime, terror and brutality overwhelm most people's humane tendencies.
I want to begin my presentation with 4 events that I would otherwise call incidents if they did not have to do with genocide denial, the genocide against the Tutsi. The first event happened at the University of Delaware. The university there sponsored a faculty forum, which was very well attended, 100 faculty members. And the invited guest was a Dr. Leopold Munyakazi, who was then a professor of French at Montclair State University in New Jersey. In his speech, he said, and I quote verbatim, "There is a kind of international conspiracy to hide the truth about what happened. I refer to it as a civil war, not genocide." Now, fast forward to 2009. That year, Peter Linda, a law professor at one Minnesota college, published an article in Global Research, and the title of his article was Rwanda, no conspiracy, no genocide, no planning, no genocide. He wrote, and I quote him, "There was no conspiracy to kill civilians, much less Rwandan Tutsi civilians. This raises the more profound question. If there was no conspiracy and no planning to kill ethnic Tutsi civilians, can the tragedy that engulfed Rwanda properly be called genocide at all?" We should remember that Tutsis were targeted en masse. It was to be total annihilation. Old, young, even the unborn were targeted. Hutus who were opposed to the annihilation of Tutsis, who were opposed to their marginalization, who were opposed to their exclusion of in public life, those are the ones who were targeted. At the infamous roadblocks, the identity cards were checked to make sure that no Hutus were mistakenly killed and that no Tutsis were spared.
A Swedish proverb teaches us, the best place to find a helping hand is at the end of your own arm. Through the theme of today's 19th commemoration of the genocide against Tutsi, we reflect on such self-reliance. Again, the theme of this year's commemoration is self-reliance, and it couldn't be more fitting. During and after the genocide, Rwandans had to rely upon themselves to halt the genocide and largely have relied upon themselves to address the aftermath of accountability. We all know too well that in 1994, to its everlasting shame, the rest of the world abandoned Rwanda during its greatest time of need. In a courageous and extremely effective demonstration of self-reliance, it was the Rwandan Patriotic Front, a Tutsi group based in Uganda at the time and led by Rwanda's future president, Paul Kagame, that stopped the genocide. Afterwards, the international community that had left Rwandans to rely on themselves to end the horror of those 100 days refused to allow Rwandans to rely on themselves to address the atrocities. On November 8, 1994, the UN Security Council, on which Rwanda held a seat at the time, as it does today, voted to establish the UN tribunal, the trials of which would be located outside Rwanda, in Arusha, Tanzania, and the appeals of which would be held even further away in The Hague, the Netherlands. The Security Council did so over Rwanda's sole dissenting vote. Although Rwandan officials had requested the UN to create a war crimes tribunal, Rwanda objected to the design other members of the Security Council formulated and approved. Among other things, Rwanda objected to the fact that the UN tribunal's jurisdiction covered only the calendar year of 1994. Rwanda stressed that preparations for the genocide had started much earlier. Rwanda believed that the tribunal did not include enough trial judges and inappropriately shared an appeals chamber and a chief prosecutor with the Yugoslav tribunal. Whereas the UN tribunal's judges are selected from around the world by the UN General Assembly from a slate chosen by the UN Security Council, Gacaca's judges were all Rwandans and were elected by Rwandans and residents of Rwanda. In fact, 260,000 judges were elected to serve in Gacaca courts. Whereas few Rwandans have participated or even witnessed the UN Tribunal's proceedings, my colleague Phil Clark notes that nearly every Rwandan adult has participated in Gacaca in some way, either as a witness, defendant, or by attending weekly meetings.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride if I have things you need to borrow, for no one can feel those of your needs that you won't let show. Hello. Hi. My name is Rena Mambaleo, and the song I was singing right now was Lean on Me by Bill Withers. I am 8 years old and I'm in 2nd grade.
19 years ago, the unspeakable happened. Genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda. 1 million or more people killed in 100 days. Today, the unbelievable has happened. A success story of hope and possibility that continues to amaze the world. These are the bookends of Rwanda's story, from genocide to rebirth, a testimony to the resilience of the Rwandan people. In order to understand where Rwanda is today, acknowledging its many accomplishments, we must also honor the past, which can never be forgotten. The memories of the victims and the stories of survivors provide emotional and historic context to Rwanda's narrative. I was first touched by a survivor's testimony when I was privileged to hear Immaculée Ilibagiza speak in Chicago in January 2011. As she shared her story, hiding from the killers who had annihilated her family and wanted to take her life, I asked myself, how could someone have that much resistance? How does one person move beyond tragedy of such unspeakable proportion? Hearing her strengthened my resolve as I began to work with my co-author and good friend, Andrea Redman, on our book, Rwanda, Inc. For us, the journey to understand Rwanda's past, present, and future began in late 2010, when Andrea first traveled to the country with an organization called Bridge to Rwanda, which fosters education, entrepreneurship, and servant leadership in Rwanda. She came back convinced that there was an incredible story to be told. When I traveled with her for my first time in early 2011, I saw firsthand the transformation that we called the ultimate turnaround. Over the course of researching and writing the book, we made numerous trips to Rwanda, and we spoke with dozens of people in the private sector and in government, including President Paul Kagame and many ministers of government. We learned that Rwanda's comeback was not a rebuilding of what had existed before. Rather, Rwanda was being created anew while drawing upon deep and revered cultural traditions. In President Kagame's words, it was, quote, "It is not about recreation of what used to be, but creation of something that is actually very different and from nothing. Today, Bishop John sees Rwanda's future as one that is rooted in self-reliance and self-determination. As he explained to us, and as we heard from so many others, Rwanda's post-genocide goals in every area, education, healthcare, private sector development, all of them are interconnected. To be successful, people must have confidence in the government, in each other, and in themselves, and to see their part in it. Rwanda moves forward with a momentum that honors the past, with justice and consequences, and also forgiveness and reconciliation.
As we honor and pray for those who died and paid tribute to the survivors, let us renew our commitment to ourselves and to each other to ensure that genocide never occurs again, and to continue to uphold the memory of the events in 1994 as a reminder to us all the insurmountable cost of intolerance, of hatred, and of indifference.
Thank you very much. The Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, my friend and sister Cynthia Kwete, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, and the other senior officials from the UN, Ambassador Joseph Mutaboba, Excellencies, ambassadors, my colleagues, and members of the diplomatic corps, distinguished speakers, friends of Rwanda, dear Rwandans, ladies and gentlemen. We are gathered here to put together our hearts and thoughts, dedicate our time to remember the victims, but also use this 19th commemoration as an opportunity to reflect on the past, try and understand and have a full grasp of what befell our country in 1994, with the purpose of reminding ourselves what happened and chat around what we should do to make sure that this does not happen again in our country and beyond. His Excellency President Paul Kagame said in one of the commemoration events, I think the 16th commemoration, that we always remember them so that even those who did not experience it may learn the history of the genocide and its causes and know lessons that will make it impossible to repeat it. That's the whole point of coming together. But as it was mentioned by different speakers, genocide doesn't happen overnight. It's never a spontaneous act. It's never just another act of war. Genocide is a process. It is planned and executed by those in power. But I want to take this opportunity also, on that note, despite the fact that the international community as a whole looked the other way as Rwandans were being slaughtered, to express my profound gratitude to our men and women in uniform, especially the RP at the time, that marched through thick and thin to stop the madness, to bring to an end the killings. But now the question is, as we remember, as we pray for those who perished, as we reflect on the causes, as we appreciate our failures and those who helped to stop genocide, what is it that this is the big question that we are doing apart from remembering those who died and expressing our strong and solid support to the survivors? what is it that we are doing together to make sure that this does not happen again in Rwanda and elsewhere in the world. The theme of this year, really, it's about remembering, but also becoming self-reliant. What it means is that once you have created peace and stability, once you have undertaken very strong measures in terms of uniting your people, in terms of peace, unity, and reconciliation, once you have put in place strong justice system to deal with impunity that has been a problem in the past, once you have put in place socio-economic programs to transform the country, then you are taking a very positive path. What is important is to make sure that we own this process as Rwandans. We bring our allies on board to make sure that Rwanda continues to be on this positive path of growth, and to make sure that Rwanda becomes a better place for Rwandans in the first place, but also for the entire humanity. So once again, I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for coming in big numbers, and I hope as we gear up for the 20th anniversary, we'll get more people, we get more organized. I thank the organizing committee for a wonderful job that they did in terms of keeping us informed and preparing this important event to remember the victims of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi.